think what's fun about uncovering history on accident is that certain rivers are drying up, so they're finding skulls from certain like Civil War, and then on the beaches of Normandy, they're finding remains.
There's stuff on the internet, and it looks valid. I don't know if it is, but it looks valid. That there in the Red Sea, that you can find chariots and different things from the Egyptians.
Oh yeah.
The guy who shows it, I mean, it looks very valid. Now, some people try to say it's not true, but then there are creationists who are going, no, it's very much true. It's dated to that time. It is of that time, and I don't know.
Now imagine that scene. You're getting ready to chase after the Israelites, and you're Pharaoh, and you go, well, let's go after them.
Right.
And then, boom, the water comes crashing down, engulfing your entire army, and you are listening to the Exchange podcast right now. See how I did that? I'm a good businessman. I know how to segue. Welcome back to the Exchange podcast, everyone.
Welcome back. This is Tom, Paul, and JaVaughn, and it is good to be back. Another week of traditional Exchange podcasting. It's just JaVaughn and I, but I got a funny story. Maybe I shouldn't tell it. We had our show prep, which we meet on Thursdays, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
did you run into another Charles Manson?
No.
Okay.
No. What happened was, Thursday night we were discussing probably kind of continue it a little bit here today. It was kind of a good conversation, but we were talking about pacifism and the different people that have the all these different sexual whatever, right, orientations. And so I was listening to a podcast, and I was also doing some research because I was thinking, what is the difference in polygamy versus polyamorous? That's how you say that, right?
Oh yeah, that is kind of. I never really thought there was a difference.
Well, there is. I mean, and it's like if you pull up the word polyamorous, there's I don't know how many words define that one single word. Now, only one defines polygamy, or polygyny, I think is how it's made for women, like a woman who's married to several men. Which they're funny enough, there's still no legal stance for that. That's still illegal. There are states that will allow multiple men to marry multiple wives. Because it's a religious thing. Well, there's one state, let me say that. Because it's a religious thing. But no one will allow a woman to marry multiple men. But so the female is polygyny versus polygamy, but then there's polyamorous. And so there's like this, I can't even remember.
I'm looking up the definitions for both.
And so it's like, so I'm looking this stuff up, and I've got this stuff on my mind, and I pull up to a restaurant. I'm not going to call the name, but you can figure out where I was. On my way to the podcast, and I wanted to get some, waffle fries and a chicken sandwich. And so they asked if I wanted any sauce. You probably know where I'm going with this. And I meant to say I wanted Polynesian sauce.
Did you say? I want polygamy sauce.
I said I want polyamorous sauce.
Boy, what a conversation for the 16, 17, or 18-year-old who just wanted to take your order, sir.
The look on that person's face. There's no retracting that.
No.
There's no retracting that.
No.
And all I could do was just say, I am so sorry. I apologize. I gave an extra tip. I said, I am so sorry.
So awkward.
Yeah, it was. I said, I tried to explain the best I could, but there's no explaining that. So I just drove around and got my stuff, and I left. And I will probably never show my face to that establishment again.
Oh my gosh. I think what you did was you gave them a good conversation starter when they walk back in. You'll never guess what this guy asked for. That might actually be a funny inside joke you gave them.
I'm sure it will be.
Because let me tell you something. Some of my favorite inside jokes and inside jokes are meant to be had and then forgotten.
Yeah.
But I know for a fact some of the best inside jokes I had was when I was at a Bible camp, hearing some of these kids say the weirdest things.
Oh,
so when you hear an adult or any human being say something weird, a good inside joke is between me and my brothers. When my sister was born, she's the only girl out of the 6 kids.
Yeah.
And we would call her Shirley Temple.
Right.
Because of the Shirley Temple commercials that would come on all the time.
Yeah.
And we just made that joke over and over. And she caught on as she got older, which is funny. But it was always funny because occasionally when the whole family gets together, we'll randomly say, "Hey, Mom, Shirley Temple wants you." You know, something funny. And, yeah, I would – oh, man, if I was that kid who took your order, I would tell all my friends, "Hey, man, hope you get that polygamy sauce."
I mean, it's embarrassing, but at the same time, I'm going, man, all these different words, you know, and you know, it's what we've done. We have so confused. We've so confused everything. I mean, you know, think about this. If someone says, "I'm going to go work on a transmission," I'm going to go work on a transformer.
I got to go work on this trans over here.
Yeah.
You can't
I mean,
say that
everything is just
that's somebody.
And I think, personally, I'm going to go from a spiritual outlook on this. I think a lot of that's designed.
Sure, I agree.
You can't even put the word poly. I don't know a parent now who would name their kid Polly anymore.
That's right. There was a time where
there was a lot of Pollys.
Yeah.
I grew up with one. I grew up with a lady I knew, knew her all of my life. Her name was Polly.
You want to know what my favorite argument that a lot of people say is, "Oh, you're asking about it. You must be interested in it." Yeah, I mean, not in the way you think it is, but genuinely, what's wrong with this? Like, what the heck? Because, you know, you said, you know, you were talking about polygamy and polyamorous, and I said, I don't get it, and I'm looking it up.
Yeah.
You know, I'll ask a lot of people in the LGBT community that I know, just like, "Hey, what does this mean?"
Right.
And they get a lot farther in my mind as respect when they don't scoff at me and they just go, "Oh, it just means this, this, and this."
Well, it's like, you're right. And you know, there is a thing going on in almost every, I don't care what culture you fall into, where if you're an outsider and you're asking, I've heard some of them say, "Well, you shouldn't be asking. Go learn."
Right.
That's why I'm asking you.
Yeah. The best teachers are us human beings talking. Not only that's where instead of anecdotal evidence, I'd like to hear your anecdote of what you know about it, because then I can, you know, when you have these articles and stuff, those are written by people talking about other people's stories, so that therefore they're still anecdotal, but I could use that. You know, the woman who was at home alone with her 3 children, and somebody breaks in and she unalives him with her Second Amendment tool.
Yeah.
Right? Oh, that's awesome. That's probably not going to happen to everybody, but it's good to take into account, hey, I'd much rather have my wife, who is with child, defending herself with something that has good results instead of her getting hurt. So, anecdotally, yeah, I'm probably not going to use that in an argument to try to prove a point.
Yeah.
But I'm going to use it.
Yeah.
I'm going to hear, you know, I have a few family members who are LGBT, and I'll just ask them sometimes, what does that mean?
Yeah.
And they're really kind to tell me, "Oh, it just means this. It just means that." And I may be over here giving this look of, why?
Right.
But, you know what? At the end of the day, I don't care to cause an argument. That's how little I care anymore.
Yeah.
I
think a lot of times we have to we a lot of people try to use different definitions, different meanings. They use there's all these different words, and you know, I heard someone say this week, and it's true. You know, the reason why the plus is at the end of the LGBTQ plus is because they can keep adding. You know, and there are some that they've added to that even people in the gay community are going, why? And trans is one of them. They're going, wait a minute, we have fought for years to gain these, and these guys are just going to do it overnight.
Just add it. Well,
you know what I mean?
Dave Chappelle put it best. You know, civil rights, took a while. We should have just been gay. Now I'm paraphrasing, and he's making a joke, and some people are.
You got to get that.
But you got to understand, black people definitely look at the LGBTQ community. Some black people look at them with disdain because it's like some of them really were chased off with dogs.
Yeah,
and to say if you're going to compare what happened to my grandmother and my grandfather and their family members to somebody online saying baguette,
right?
You can figure out where I'm going with that one.
Yeah,
then you need to calm down a little bit and take a step back, because I'm still confused on the rights thing. I'm still always going to be confused
as far as the civil rights is concerned.
No, civil rights. It's for everybody. Meaning you
no,
could
but I was kind of saying that because it's like you and I kind of talked about this, and I think Dave Chappelle, in a comical way, because it's what comedians do, right? They bring about social truths through comedy, just as musicians do it through music, artists, whatever. And yeah. I think that's a funny way of putting it. But there's a lot of truth to it. Civil rights cost a lot of people's lives, just like it was when we fought the war for independence. I mean, the thing they said is that we pledge our lives, our wealth, and our sacred honor, and it was the same thing with people fighting for the civil rights battle. They were giving things up based upon something they can't hide.
Yeah.
Right. And see, there's a scripture, and of course, obviously, nobody's looking at this from a scriptural standpoint.
Why would they?
But there is a scripture where Paul says there are parts of the body that and I'm paraphrasing this, that we show, such as the face, but then there are those hidden parts of the body, which discretionary purposes I don't have to say.
Yeah.
But we know what those are.
Yep.
And it's. Sexuality is one of those. You don't have to go hot dogging what you are. You know what I'm saying? Because it's like going, okay, if we were in the 1950s and, you or I walk into one part of the town that we're not supposed to be, that's just complete evil. Yeah. Because you're going in to get something to eat, but because of the color of your skin, you can't.
I can't hide that.
You can't hide that.
Yeah.
But if I'm going to go into a place because I want to deliberately create a scene or create a problem, which I don't. Do you know of a restaurant that says can't come in here because you're trans? I don't. Not even in the Deep South, where they claim that all the Southerners hate them. And I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about the people behind the establishment that's pushing this.
I guess the question I have to ask is it because you're embarrassed? And by embarrassed, I really mean by are you embarrassed that you don't feel comfortable?
Right.
Like, are you worried that somebody's going to find out you're trans and therefore you project that you're not the same as everyone, and that's okay, because I can't tell you how many times when I was in high school I felt uncomfortable. Yeah. But I didn't take it out on the whole restaurant. I didn't take it out on people. I didn't claim that my rights are being. It's just, you can tell when somebody's acting out of emotion instead of reason.
Mm-hmm.
And it's in a lot of people, and I think that taking down that barrier of, well, men and women are the same. Well, we're not.
Mm-hmm.
We're just not. While my dad was here, it was my dad, my mom, and my sister.
Right.
And my mom, I'm not going to get into details, but my mom and I had a little bit of a disagreement, and Sarah was explaining to my mom that if JaVaughn can't tackle it logically, he's going to keep trying to figure out what it is you're talking about logically. Mm-hmm. So sometimes you have to find a way to speak to him logically. And thank God for my wife, because I don't think anybody's ever stood up for me like that in terms of how I think, because my wife knows me the best. But sometimes, and this is just for the listeners, sometimes, and a lot of times us guys, we just think logically. Hey, it's raining. Okay, get an umbrella. It's not, hey, it's raining. Now I got to do this. Now I got to do. It's like, just get an umbrella.
Right.
You know, I need to take the trash out. Well, it's raining. Get an umbrella and run if you have to. Who cares?
Right.
You know, you still need to do something. You still need to take care of these things. And a lot of us think logically. And it's not that I don't care to not think logically or be empathetic to my wife and how she's feeling, because my wife is a woman, surprise, and she thinks very emotionally. Sometimes I do have to break down my barrier and try to be empathetic with her. But let me tell you something. That takes a lot of work.
Yeah.
And I ain't got I do not have the patience to try to do that with everyone. Meaning that's where grace comes in, I think. That's where grace comes in. Where, hey, if you're trans and you walk into our church and you're worried that somebody's going to out you because you're trans or whatever here at church.
We had one come here for a little while.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
See? Didn't know, didn't care.
Nobody pointed it out.
Good.
And you know, and the point being is, you know, it was one of those things where it's like, okay, we're going to preach the gospel.
That's it.
Regardless, and we're going to say what the Bible says. You don't have to like it, but I promise everybody's getting something preached that's going to hit home with them that they may or may not like it. That's what the gospel is about, you letting it change you. You're not trying to change it.
Yeah.
But why do I want to change the gospel into what my problems already are?
Yeah.
Why do I want to do that?
Yeah, why do I want my problems to be exponentially worse by changing everything around me to fit my problems instead of me trying to fix my problems?
Well, and here, one of the things that I read about the whole thing, as we were talking about with the polyamorous, and it pointed out navigating through jealousy, and that was one I was going, why? I understand if you've got a couple and the one person is just, you know, insanely jealous to the point of stupidity, that happens. But if I've got to talk to a partner or they've got to talk to me about, hey, I'm going to do this. I don't want you to be jealous over this. What you're asking me to do at the end of the day is not care.
Yeah. That's not fair.
You're asking me to say, okay, I am choosing not to have any emotional engagement or involvement in this whatsoever. This is just purely a sexual agreement. That's it. That's all it becomes.
It's near impossible for both parties to be like that.
They don't ever work.
And if you do find a couple or people, let's say you find two people who are totally fine with that. I think the sad part is that it's not about you at a certain point when it comes to relationships.
Yeah.
And if you think, oh, well, you're right, it's not about me, so therefore I'm going to allow my spouse to just sleep with whoever because I'm that caring for them. When I say it's not about you, it's also, hey, and I'm going to briefly touch on this. I'm sure some people have seen this in the pop culture sphere, but there's a guy named Adam22. He interviews a bunch of rappers, and he's been on social media like YouTube and Twitter and stuff, just talking about how after him and his wife got married a month ago, she decided to, because he is a prawn star, and his wife is too, and they both do that together. But for the first time, right after their marriage, she was with another man for a video shoot. And so a lot of people are like, man, why would you do this? And he says, oh, it doesn't bother me that she did this. Yes, it did.
Should.
No, it did, because he let it slip that, you know, it kind of hurt me.
Sure.
And it's like, it did.
Yeah.
But also, he's saying, I think my biggest issue is that people care. And I said, it's not that we care, it's that you put it out there for people to see. And this is how people are going to react. The majority of us are saying this is wrong because A, they have a kid.
Yeah.
And let me ask you something, Thomas. For a kid in high school, what's the most brutal like smackdown in terms of verbal abuse you're gonna get is from teachers. No,
it's from your peers.
it's from your peers.
Yeah.
So what I'm thinking is, you're two adults. You want to do that, do your thing, sure. But I know you have a daughter. I know that daughter's going to grow up. Sure, she's going to have a lot of money because you guys do this stuff, whatever.
Yeah.
Let me tell you something. I don't think she's going to appreciate the extensive harassment.
Yeah.
Because people would say, well, people should just raise their kids to be better. You're right. And I was raised by two great parents, and I was still brutal to certain people because it was just easy.
Yeah.
And this girl's got two parents who do these things, and people would say, oh, kids don't care about that. Kids do.
Yeah.
Kids wonder.
Yeah.
Kids are curious. Kids see these things, And again, I just wanted to briefly touch on that because we're breaking the barriers down to where it's gotten to the point where this polyamorous stuff, polygamy, I'm not going to tell you to do things the way I believe they should be done. But don't get mad when you put it out in the open and then the criticism comes, because my least favorite thing is when people say, oh, well, you should mind your business. Don't put it out for everybody to see.
Yeah, if you put it on public, it becomes my business.
It's my business. My business is the public eye. I don't live under a rock. I don't live out in the woods. I would love to. I don't live, by myself with no connection to the world. I live in the world. I'm not of the world, but I'm in it.
Right.
And therefore, when I see it, it does get to a point where it's like, this is wrong. And it's not like I'm not going to point at somebody and be like, you're disgusting, because I know how hurtful that can be and painful to hear from somebody. And I'm sure Adam 22 doesn't give a crap about what I have to say.
Yeah.
But I feel bad, man. Like, I'm married. I'm looking at it from a soon-to-be dad and a husband standpoint, and I'm thinking, I can't even fathom that, because I know my wife would be disgusted by just the thought of her being with another person.
Right.
And that's because I know my wife. I know, and even if, and the thought came up because the question was, Thomas, and I guess I'll ask anybody who's listening who wants to comment, what's your price for somebody to sleep with your wife?
Well, there was that movie back. Of course, you probably don't remember.
I know what you're talking about, because actually it got brought back. That movie got brought back up where it's a Lawrence of Arabia type style movie where Indecent Proposal.
Indecent Proposal, yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember when that movie came out. That movie was shocking.
Right.
That was shocking even in the secular world. Like, people who were not Christian, people who did not claim to be Christian or go to church. I remember that movie was shocking.
Yeah, but $1 million back then was like...
Well, it wasn't even about the $1 million, because that's pretty much what he asks. What's your price? And of course, the movie goes on to play out that it more or less leaves it that couple divorces after that happens, because they can't deal with that decision. The money was nothing. It was, and in today's day and time, I think that whole storyline would be reversed. And it just goes to show you how much people's views have changed. And I know we say, well, but that's because people are awakening to this, or they're educating themselves to that. And I'm not sure that's not the problem. I'm all for education, but there are some things that we are allowing ourselves to learn. Certain behaviors we're allowing ourselves to learn, and to say, well, that's okay, that's you. And it's like, well, but let's look at some of the people that it has not ended well, and why.
I think it's the majority of people it hasn't ended well.
Yeah.
And I said this is going to sound very controversial, but for the most part, the people who are wanting like polyamory and polygamy, the people who are on YouTube, like Adam 22, I know Destiny and his wife have an agreement, and I don't care what they do. I just know about it because it gets brought up a lot. It's not like I think about it constantly.
Right.
It's just I watch these people because I like to get a diverse source of information. But those two guys, Adam 22 and Destiny, they are the rare few who are making money, and they have a prosperous life, not because they're polygamy or anything, not because of the polygamy, but they have all this money. And it reminds me of like the kings of old, You know, they had concubines and multiple women and all that stuff. And I'm not saying that's what they're doing. I'm just saying it just reminds me of that. But those people who are like you and I, who are they're not making millions of dollars every month, not making hundreds of thousands every month. But those of us who are just doing their day-to-day job, the people who want polygamy, they ain't doing too hot for themselves.
Right.
They're not healthy.
Right.
They're just in it for the sexual pleasure and the spice, quote unquote, of being with multiple people, and you could tell spiritually, because you and I were talking about this 2 days ago. Spiritually, something happens within, it then starts to overflow outward, and you can see it, you know, doing something to people, and that's what it is that you see these people struggling sexually, where some of the people who want to be polygamous are not the best looking, probably don't get a lot of dates, and probably did this so that they could feel some type of love.
Well, you mentioned a word Thursday when we were talking, and the word was depravity, and you know it is a depraved, and it made me think of Romans 1:28. It says, "Furthermore, just as they did not think it worthwhile to retain the knowledge of God, so God gave them over to a depraved mind, so that they do what ought not to be done." And then that next verse jumps down and says, "They have become filled with every kind of wickedness, evil, greed, and depravity. They are full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, and malice. They are gossips." Does that not sound like our society, where we are? The further we have moved away, and I'll throw this one in. We're a Christian podcast. Our podcast looks at things through the Christian lens. We are a podcast that looks at things through a biblical Christian lens. However, I'm going to say this. I believe that Christ is the only way. So I want to say that before, you know, all of this stuff starts about, you know. But I say this because as our society just moves away from a faith in God, right?
Oh yeah.
Not necessarily Christian, but in God. We're seeing this start. We're seeing more and more of this stuff, and so it's not. People are like, well, what about, you know, this is going to bring God's judgment. If I'm reading Romans 1 correctly, those actions are God's judgment, because it says He gives them over. They didn't. He says there earlier. He says they didn't retain the knowledge. What's He talking about? The knowledge. The Bible says, in the day that you seek Him with all His heart, then He'll be found.
Right.
The Bible says that fear is the beginning of wisdom. So our knowledge is retained through how we study God. Are we disciplined to study God? Are we desiring to study God and His attributes? And He says, you know, they had no desire to seek after me whatsoever. God didn't say, this is why when people say, well, I was born like this. No, you weren't born like this.
You weren't born depraved to give in to these desires.
No, it's because you chose not to go, I'm created for something more. First of all, I'm not created for myself. Let me say it like this. I believe that there's only two sexes. But do you know we're not even to be identified by male or female? We're to be identified by being created in the image of God.
Yes. Yeah.
That's how we're to be identified and how we identify ourselves. And the Bible says that he created them male and female. But what we've done is we have so allowed ourselves that God says, you've chose not to retain me in your knowledge, so now I'm just going to go ahead and let you go your direction. Mm-hmm. And then eventually you find yourself into depravity. And think of how many people talk about being depressed. Why are they depressed? Because all that right there that he lists, the greed, the malice, the envy, the strife, the gossiping.
Yeah.
Go on social media and you'll start to feel like you're not doing anything.
Yeah. The greed part, I can speak on that. When I first got married to Sarah, we we weren't struggling like a lot of people out here are. I wanted more.
Yeah.
And therefore I thought we were struggling.
Yeah.
And that is the full circle of these depressing situations. Yes. Okay? You go on the internet, you watch adult videos, and let's say you're single. That full circle is eventually you start to realize, oh, no woman's going to want me. It's like, well, you keep looking at women on your phone and you don't put in the effort to actually be something greater than that.
Right.
There's your full circle. Look at the gluttony. Well, I feel depressed and I don't want to go to the gym because I'm self-conscious about my body, but I'm self-conscious about my body because I don't go to the gym. That's a quote from Bo Burnham, one of the greatest comedians of all time. But it's true. You're in a recursive loop.
Yeah.
All right. I don't see it ever getting better, and being given over to your depraved ways isn't a flex either.
No.
You know, I think that's.
But they call it freeing, is what they say.
Well, they call it pride.
Yeah.
You know, and pride goeth before the fall.
Yeah.
And let me tell you something. They talk about this community that, and I say I'm talking about the LGBT community. They talk about this community that they have, and it's like, you guys are all sad.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You guys are all sad.
Yeah.
All right? At least when I go to church here at Convergent City Church in Conway, people are sad here, and you want to know what they say? I'm sad, but I have the joy of the Lord.
Yeah.
And I'm still I want to fellowship with you guys. I want to be here with you guys.
Yeah.
And a family is built. I'm not saying every LGBT sect community that they have is always depressed, but for the majority of it, I just hear things from people. Well, I'm just sad. I'm depressed. I drink all the time. It's like, okay, dude, you guys go outside. Go do something.
Right.
But yeah, that's what I wanted to touch on, the depravity of because cuckoldry came up again. People want to talk about incels, but even if you have millions of dollars, there are videos of your wife. There's videos of a dude's wife with another man. Yeah, I'd probably be an incel too. I'd probably say I don't want to be married to anybody, because if the millionaire's having other people get down with his wife, what do I have? What hope is there for me?
Right.
That's just what I would think.
Well, of course, we've both got beards, but something that reminded, we tend to think that the transgenderism is something that's new, or cuckolding, or any of this stuff is something that it's not. It dates way, way back. And Clement of Alexandria, who lived in 150 A.D., he wrote one time, and he said in this quote of his, the question. So what he writes is, do you shave? That's what he asks. That's what this whole thing. And he says the hair of the chin showed him to be a man. How womanly it is for one who is a man to comb himself and shave himself with a razor for the sake of fine effect, and to arrange his hair at the mirror, shave his cheeks, pluck hairs out of them, and smooth them. For God wished women to be smooth and to rejoice in their locks and showing grace spontaneously as a horse in his mane. But he adorned man like the lions with a beard, and endowed him as an attribute of manhood with a hairy chest and a sign of strength and rule. And wow, that's, and I understand why. A lot of times in the ancient world, they would shave themselves for hygiene purposes. And I get that. But this is something that society, that the world has been struggling with for a really long time. And when you look at all of these cultures that have collapsed, the same trajectory that the United States is on, they were on. And what I'm trying to say is that, it is not freeing to be okay to see your wife with another man. It is not freeing to say, oh, I can have multiple partners while being in one relationship. that there's nothing freeing about that. That is imprisoning. That is in fact bondmanship.
You want to know what the most freeing thing is from the Bible? It's when it says, "Do these things so that you are above reproach."
Mm-hmm.
I'm putting this out there in the ether, as they say. But Lord willing, nothing crazy in my past will come up to bite me in the butt. But I have been respectful to the people I've either dated or been with or been around. I'm sure I've hurt a lot of them too. But at the end of the day, I have lived here after college, and it has been what has been freeing is knowing that I haven't done anything that somebody can accuse me of in terms of like, because you'll see this happen a lot on in the YouTube sphere, because I wouldn't call us YouTubers. We want to be podcast hosts.
Yeah.
But like we have a YouTube channel, but you'll see a lot of YouTubers get accused of SA, schmexual schmashmal.
Yeah.
Because we're on YouTube, guys. But you have these people who get accused of SA, and they're YouTubers, and it's because they're talking to kids. And I haven't had anybody accuse me of that, because they never will, because I'm against all that. Surprise, surprise. But that is freeing.
So, if you want to go read what I just read, it's on biblical manhood, and the article "Do You Shave?" And I love this name. This is his name. The article is by Scott Bushy. So if you
I hate that.
if you want to know biblical manhood and whether or not you should have a beard, go read this article by Scott Bushy. I'm sure he's got a bushy beard. He's probably got probably a great guy. And they also, just in case, if you are of a culture that cannot grow facial hair, they do have inflatable beards. You can wear it like, I think it. Yeah, you can wear it. Inflatable beard. Uh-huh.
Maybe I'm just taken aback by what?
Well, if you want to prove you're a man, Scott Bushy is. This article is.
That's the Christmas gift if I've
beard.
ever seen one.
Oh yeah. This segment by Inflatable Beard. It is what does it say here? Distinguished, dignified, and de bon air. That's French.
Okay. That's looking like Robert E. Lee.
Are you finding it?
I found an inflatable beard on Amazon.
That's yes. So there's no excuse to not have a beard. There's no excuse. There's no excuse to not be a man.
Yeah, guys, go get a beard.
And I'm sure you can find bodysuits with the hair chest.
Yeah. You could buy the silicone bodysuits, on Amazon.
You can start to look like Austin Powers, with the hair coming out.
See, you say Austin Powers. I'm gonna mention something that people my age will remember, but maybe you remember too. But there was a SpongeBob episode where Sandy was at the beach with Larry the lobster, and they were all working out. SpongeBob had 2 marshmallows on a stick, and he couldn't lift them. And then he saw a TV commercial about these anchor arms. That's what they're called.
Yeah.
Good Lord. And you put them on, you blow them up, and they look like muscly arms. And it was like, there's 3 settings. There's medium, large, and hairy for the ladies. And it's like, it's just funny to me that because that comedy is still unmatched. That's still hilarious to me.
Right.
That, they're making fun of it, but it's real, because you can go on the internet. I've seen dudes do pranks where it's like, I'm going to be pranking people at the beach with my new figure, and it was a black silicone piece on a white guy. So he's walking around the beach with this 6-pack that looks like black skin, walking around, and everybody's just kind of doing a double take. It's like, that's obviously fake, but it's hilarious because we have these things, because people, at the end of the day, people want that physique. People want to be a dude. And maybe I'm not red-pilled by any means, but I still laugh at the idea that, like, you got to be a man. You got to work out. You got to eat steak. You got to eat potatoes. I did eat steak and potatoes last night. It was delicious.
So,
Sorry, I got off track.
no, that's fine. Red pilled. I'm still not 100% clear on what all the pills
I don't care about the red pill. I don't care about the blue pill. I don't care about the black. The black pill is something that I'm interested in. All it is just being an what is it? Oh shucks, not narcissism.
Black pilled.
Black pilled is being apathetic. Just not caring and just being like, okay, this sucks. Life
Should
sucks.
we be like that?
Should we be apathetic?
Yeah.
That's an antithesis to the Bible. Period.
Yeah.
Because I will quote.
Oh, I see what you're saying now.
I will be.
I thought you were saying that that's the way you were. I got you.
No. I will quote one of the best video games of all time, Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic 2. But there's a line in there where eventually you have to make a choice, and then you could make the choice of I'm not going to do anything.
Yeah.
And then your master says, apathy's death.
Right.
It's worse than death because at least a rotting corpse can feed the plants.
Yeah.
And so at the end of the day, if you're black-pilled and you're like, oh, screw life, everything sucks, who cares? I don't care anymore. You're worse than death. It's not a good thing. It's not good to be there. And I would say I'd much rather – it's like the lukewarm thing.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people when I was in high school would say, okay, we can't be lukewarm, we can't be cold. No. Let me tell you something. Cold
and hot both have their purposes.
They have their purposes.
And here's the thing: it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to hell because you're cold.
No. If you're cold,
lukewarm.
No. Let's be honest though. If I'm in Arizona, I need cold water.
Right.
But if I'm up in the Alps,
Yeah.
I want some hot cocoa with.
Yeah.
You got to make it with water.
Well,
some people make it with milk.
And right now it escapes me which church he was talking about. Was that Sardis? I think maybe I can't remember. It escapes which church he was talking about.
Because it's in Revelation.
Yeah, and what he's referring to there is he said, "I would prefer you hot or cold, but if you're lukewarm, I'll spew you out of my mouth." And what was going on in that area was, I think in that area, if my memory serves, again, I want to be careful what I'm saying, but I think there is a polar cap there, an ice cap, kind of in that
Laodicea. So archaeologists said there was a hot spring and a cold river that ran through with that ice cap.
And you could go to either or and get that for what you needed.
Right.
But once those waters mixed,
right,
it would sit there, and then it would start to develop all this bacteria.
I was about to say,
and people would get sick. And sometimes they would go and get the bacteria because somebody would have a sickness and they needed to expel it. So they'd give they'd give them that, and it could end up killing them.
Well, most likely,
kind of like they, when they bled George Washington to death.
Right.
It's kind of like what was it Donald Trump said he said we can't allow the cure to be worse than the disease.
Right.
And that's kind of what they found out was the cure was becoming worse than disease. So Jesus is saying, look, if you're this, I'm going to spew you out of my mouth.
Yeah, I think he's referring to, when you look at it from a biblical perspective and you look at it theologically, he's talking about a church that's concerned with wealth and the culture. And surprise, we are in a country where a lot of our churches are worried about wealth and the culture.
Right.
Because I was talking to two of our members of our church, my wife and one of her friends, and I said, this is why the church in America needs to stop making mega churches, because the mega churches are just the culture with a Jesus bumper sticker on it.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is that they're so, look at the Hillsong Netflix special or whatever, where they're talking about how there's a lot of scandals in there.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you why there's a lot of scandals. It's too big. And there is such a thing as too big of a congregation because you lose too many people.
Mm-hmm.
And you can have all the small groups you want, but again, it's too big because the pastor, I know my pastor. My mom and dad know their pastor.
Yeah.
I go to these big churches.
A church running about 2,000, between 1,800 and 2,000 is manageable.
I believe it.
Once it starts getting up 5,000, 8,000, it almost becomes more CEO-like.
When you have like 3 to 4 services at 8 different campuses, you're bugging.
Yeah.
You're bugging. At that point, you might as well be your own city.
Do you know who G.E. Patterson is? Dr. G.E. Patterson?
I've not heard the name. So
okay, well, he's dead now.
Shucks.
You know the Church of God in Christ?
Yeah.
Okay. primarily, it was the African American. Of course, there's some segregational issues that happened years ago, and that's the reason why they became an organization. Won't get into that today. We might delve in that later, but today's not that day. But he was for years. He pastored one of their largest churches in Memphis, Tennessee, and he was kind of their overseer for a long time. Their general bishop, whatever they call him, and he said not many years before he passed away, he ran a church. I think I'm not sure, that probably was 12, but between 10 and 15,000, I think.
Oh, Jiminy Christmas!
And he said, looking back now, if he had that to do over again, he used the verses there where Moses' father-in-law tells him to divide the companies up.
Yeah, that's right.
And then he goes on to talk about where Jesus sat them down in multitudes of tens, 50s, hundreds, and thousands. And he said, we were getting the blueprint in the Bible on how to do this. And he said, once church reaches a certain point, he said, it gets to the point where the pastor is no longer the pastor.
Yep.
And he said, if I had it to do over again, he said, as soon as this church hit about 500 to 600 people, I would take 65 or 70 and go start another church.
Yeah. You could leave it with somebody else who can work with
or
that.
Go send you've got a minister sitting out there who's chomping at the bits to go do something.
Yeah, so then you
go send him over and say, hey,
raise him up.
You guys go support this guy.
Yep. And then you work together, but you don't have to be to give an example, I went to Grand Canyon University in Phoenix, and in Phoenix there's a church called Christ Church of the Valley. It's massive. Their Easter service has been done. I don't know if they do it still like this, but has been done at Cardinal Stadium for the Arizona Cardinals, the football team.
I thought you were talking about St. Louis. I was like, that's Busch Stadium, man.
Yeah.
And that's sacrilege here.
and they do a service. I think it was either Christmas or Easter, one of those. And that's how big they were.
Yeah.
They were able to bring all their campus, and it wasn't as if each campus had their own thing to say.
Yeah.
A pastor would get up in front of one church and would do it live, but then they would broadcast it to the rest of these churches. I'm like, how do you have an interpersonal relationship with your Congress if all they get is you on the screen?
Right.
Because at this point, you're calling yourself a movie star.
Yeah.
Equivalent. In terms of if I'm a kid and let's say I'm a teenager and I'm going to this church and I see this teacher teaching on a screen, I'm disconnected fully. I'm not. I don't care. I'm never going to meet him.
Right.
Why should I have a relationship with Christ if I can't even have a relationship with the person who's teaching me about Christ? So that's just something that needs to be looked after, because when a church gets like that, they are really just worried about culture.
Yes.
They're really worried about money, and that's it. And so that's why you have these people standing up and putting the pride flag in church. Yeah, is because they're worried about culture. The culture around them.
Let's go. Let's go back to 1920s and 30s Germany. That's exact. I mean, you went into a church, you were likely to find a swastika.
Right.
In a lot of churches, maybe even most churches. You had a few that weren't. You had the I can't think of his name. His name should not be slipping my mind right now. But the minister, him and along with some other ministers stood against that, and of course he ended up losing his life. But that's exactly what happened. Was the culture had infiltrated the church, and Bonhoeffer's the guy I was trying to think of, and he really was preaching against that. And he wrote some great books that I would recommend anyone to go read. And you would walk into a typical German church and there wouldn't be crosses, there'd be swastikas. And if you go to China, if there is a church where people can meet, they have to have a picture of not a cross
of the prime minister,
or the
whatever
supreme leader or whatever as they call him, President Xi
Jinping, Winnie the Pooh,
China. But
every time I say China, I can't say it.
I had a friend who got banned from Facebook
because he said China.
No, he put Winnie the Flu.
Yeah,
and it had Xi on the He got banned from Facebook for that for like 5 days.
Oh man. Funny side note about China. So in the video game world, you can play with anybody around the world, as long as they have internet connection and everything. Well, the stereotype of like Asians, so like the Chinese, Koreans, and Japanese being really good at video games. Well, if you see Korean characters or if you see Japanese characters, there's not really much you can do about it.
Right.
Okay. You're probably about to get beat pretty badly at whatever game you're playing. Let's say it's Call of Duty. And let's say you're playing and you see characters and the characters are Chinese. It is a proven fact that if you type into the game chat, hey, what happened at Tiananmen Square in the 1980s?
It just goes away.
They will be cut off completely.
I don't think you can even find it in history books in China anymore.
No, you can't. And so you type that in. Let's say this guy's beating you really bad, and you're like, man, I hate this guy so much. You just type in Tiananmen Square 1980s. Boom, they're gone. So, I mean, the censorship is crazy.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's the reason that I get laughed at, because I don't really do a lot of books, audiobooks.
Oh yeah.
I like to actually go and buy the book. So obviously, especially Bibles. I mean, you walk into my library, you find a lot of Bibles. Because I think with the rapid movement towards AI, I think that we're going to go that same way as they do with Tiananmen Square. At some point, we could wake up and it's going to be gone.
Yeah, it's going to be easier to just kind of...
AI will completely reconfigure. It'll all be gone.
Yeah.
And that's why, even the psalm said, your word have I hid in my heart, that I may not sin against you. Because there may come that point when that's going to have to be the case. Because whatever Bible you do have, you're going to have to keep it hid.
Yeah,
But going back though, I want to say the Tiananmen Square thing. Yeah, no, I knew, and that's what I think a lot of times is. I think that that's what, because in China they can't even talk about like that ever that never happened to them, right? Yeah, it's an amazing thing.
That's what they say. And with that, I think I could say that this has been a good exchange. I've had a
Scott Bushy, I invite you on to this exchange. You have an open invitation right now, just because of your name. I want to see what Scott Bushy has to say about this.
Can you imagine if he doesn't have a beard?
He better have a beard.
Well, he can get an inflatable one.
Okay.
So
if you come on, we'll buy an inflatable beard for that show.
Well, guys, it is current year of the Lord and Savior Jesus Christ here, and get yourself an inflatable beard today. You guys have a good weekend.